How's everybody feeling today? That's a loaded question when we're about to talk about emotions, isn't it? I'm Lisa Laramy, and I'm with the Wellness Department at Berkshire Medical Center, and I'm happy to bring this presentation to you today. So emotions are something that obviously we all experience, and we think we know our emotions pretty well. But as a society, we really don't talk much about emotions. We tend to be more comfortable asking people how they're doing rather than how they're feeling. We often say, I think rather than I feel. There's just not a lot of, emotional context that we're comfortable with. And I think a lot of us aren't really taught how to deal with emotions, especially the difficult ones. Instead of learning how to handle them with skill, we tend to, pay attention to what others are doing and learn socially just by looking around. So, really, I think that leaves us with, oftentimes having the wrong idea about what emotions are and how to handle them. So we know that emotions are, pretty important. And I'm going to go over, today a little bit about how they're created so that you get a sense of what they really are and also how much they really guide you in your life. So we're going to move into the slides here. Oops. So most people think that happiness and success come from the big choices we make in our lives, buying the house, getting the car, choosing your career path. But that's actually not true. Happiness and success actually come from the moment-to-moment choices we make every day. And it's also not only that, but more specifically, it's also how we show up and face unpleasant situations and feelings that dictate, a good, successful outcome. So most of us prefer to think, we've been taught about the left brain and the right brain, if any of us have ever taken an anatomy course, that, we think decision making is really a rational process where reasoning calculates the best way to achieve a goal, right? That left brain usually guides us with logic. But research has actually shown that human decisions and actions are much more influenced by intuition and emotion. So that right brain actually has a great bearing on things that happen to you and choices you make. So why do we have emotions? I'm just going to share with you a few little factoids on what these crazy or sensible, good, bad, positive, negative, however we want to call them, emotions impact us. It turns out to be they're very critical to human beings. They really help us make sense of the world. That's our brain's job, is to take things in through our senses and try to make meaning out of them. So that's where these emotions come in, and they drive us to make appropriate or inappropriate actions. They help us ultimately to survive, to know when there's danger or stressors or things that threaten us. They also help us, again, to make decisions and also how we relate to others. It helps us understand other humans and other creatures. The other thing about our emotional response we have to always be aware of is that it affects everybody around us for the better or the worse. And it also shapes your relationships, again, for good or for bad. But what I'm going to say about emotions really is that they're truly, science shows, they're just guesses. They're guesses that your brain constructs in the moment based on your past experiences. So I think this is where we have to challenge if these guesses are correct. So let's talk a little bit more about unpleasant emotions, since we know that those are the ones that are really important to be aware of and how to navigate them. Because again, most of us have not been taught how to cope with these, and they can feel out of control. So again, even though these are a crucial part of being human, sometimes, unfortunately, they lead us to make a wrong decision. If you've ever tried to make a decision when you're angry or in a bad mood, usually that's when we're taking risks, right? We're not always making the most logical decisions. Or maybe making decisions when you're sad or defeated. That's usually when we shrink away from challenges and we don't show up quite the way we want to. So we have to recognize, again, our emotional state and how it can completely change a decision or an outcome. The other thing is thinking about how we show up to these emotions. Do we try to ignore them? I think a lot of times in society we do, and we have a lot of habits and behaviors that we turn to try to kind of ignore these unpleasant things that we don't know how to deal with. But oftentimes they're trying to tell us something, right? Something important. So sometimes we need to listen to them. And lastly, I want to say that unpleasant emotions may feel uncontrollable at times, but we're actually not at their mercy the way that we think we do. And on this next slide, I'm going to share the big truth that emotions are not hardwired reactions programmed from birth, like we kind of tend to think they are. You actually construct them. You are in complete control of these emotions because you made them. And I'm going to back up and not say you're in complete control, not at this point, but this means that we can gain control over them because they're of our making. So let's talk a little bit about where emotions come from. Your brain's most important job is really keeping your body alive. So to accomplish this, it devotes much of its time to predicting what's going to happen next, so your body can be ready for any situation. So in a sense, as I was saying before, your emotions are constructed unconsciously from 3 ingredients: your body budget, which we're going to talk about and explain. I know that sounds foreign. Your current situation, and then also predictions from your past experience. So if you can modify any of these 3 ingredients, that means you can take some control over your emotions and what happens as a result of them. So let's dive in a little bit deeper to each of these components. Let's talk about the body budget first. So along with predictions about the world, your brain also makes them about your body so you stay alive and healthy. It forecasts when your heart should speed up or slow down, when your blood pressure should rise and fall, when your breathing should deepen, maybe when you need more salt or water or food or hormones need to be adjusted. So basically your body is trying to meet these needs before they even arise. So your body is always running smoothly. So you can think of the body budget like biological currency instead of money, right? So this budgeting process basically continues throughout your entire life. And most of the time you're not aware of it, but it produces something you know well, and that's your mood. Somehow, through a mysterious process that nobody understands, physical movements inside your body become mental. You feel generally pleasant, unpleasant, or anywhere in between. You feel calm or agitated. Basically, your mood is like a barometer for the health of your body. And again, it's with you every moment of your life, and much of the time it's in the background and you don't even notice it. Interesting. So for hundreds of years, people have drawn a boundary between mental and physical illness. Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, they're all seen as disorders of the body, while depression and anxiety are seen as disorders of the mind. But we now know that your brain constantly regulates your body budget. And when your budget's in the red, you feel bad. So this suggests that problems with metabolism traditionally associated with the body are at the core of mood-related mental illnesses, such as depression and anxiety. It also helps explain why physical illnesses like diabetes and heart disease have persistent mood symptoms. The boundary between the physical and the mental is much more porous than we previously thought. And the understanding of this is really key to finding new pathways for prevention and treatment. So on the next slide, I'm going to give you some examples of the body budget. So basically, again, your brain is your body's metabolic body budgeter here. And the budget changes that we experience become emotion. So your body is going to regulate glucose, which is, again, the fuel that you get from food in your body. And it's going to influence how you see things. So if you guys ever heard of the term hangry, for example, having a low glucose level in the body is translated emotionally to feeling angry, right? So another example is movement and learning. They're both expensive. And you can kind of start to see the color codes that I have across the board here on what costs the body a lot from the body budget as opposed to, and what makes deposits like in green, and what costs the body a lot, which are like the items that are over in the red. So being dehydrated, for example, or you see speech, which isn't quite clear maybe at first glance, but speech means that maybe, the way that we speak to one another, the stress signals and the negative energy that we could provide to each other, that can work for positive or for negative. So again, you want to think about these things that they're mutable. They can change whether they're positive or negative and how they impact the way we feel. So again, as I mentioned, movement and learning are expensive. So when you're stressed, your brain actually cuts back on these expenses, right? So when we're anxious, it's really difficult for us to learn. Or when we're depressed as well, we're too low on energy and our body's not going to spend that from the body budget. So I want to just mention as well that a lot of people think that cortisol is a stress hormone, but actually it's something that just really generally fuels your brain. We need glucose to keep the brain running. So it's needed for activity that is metabolically costly. So again, it doesn't necessarily just mean it comes from fight or flight. We just want to recognize that when we're doing things that tax the body, sometimes that is what really triggers the cortisol. So a few other examples here for the body budget of how they could translate from physical to mental is, possibly your muscles running on low energy might actually feel like exhaustion. Too little sleep, feeling possibly like you're overwhelmed, or not knowing what to do about something that you have no experience handling can feel like anxiety. That's where your brain is trying to prime for action, doesn't know what to prime it for. So it leaves us feeling anxious because we're trying to figure out how much of this glucose we really need to perform a task that we're not sure what it is yet. So that is, in a sense, how our body budget works. So we'll talk a little bit later about some strategies on how to regulate this, but just know that there are physical pieces to this. The next ingredient, as we back up to the 3 ingredients, is your current situation dictates your emotions. So we know that our brain's job is to really make sense of things really quickly. So we're making predictions, like looking into a crystal ball. And these predictions become the emotions you experience and the expressions you perceive in other people, interestingly enough. So it's important to know that what we feel emotionally, we usually have a sensation somewhere in the body, whether we want to call it a gut feeling, a tightness in the chest or the throat, a feeling of tension through the shoulders. Usually negative emotions feel uncomfortable. And if we can actually start to label these emotions a little bit more accurately, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later, talking about emotional granularity, this helps us take the appropriate actions or none at all. Because sometimes our predictions in our heads, while they can feel incredibly real to us, may not be 100% accurate, and we need to just get a little bit more clarity on what our senses are actually telling us. Did you know, for example, that only 10% of what you see comes from your optic nerve? The rest of it is all prediction. So let's talk about that 3rd ingredient, and that's our past experiences shaping our emotional reactions. So studies show that your brain spends 60 to 80% of its energy on prediction. And in every moment, your brain issues thousands of predictions at a time, based again on those past experiences. And the ones that win usually are the ones that fit the situation in the next moment. So for example, when you're walking, each time you take a step and lift your foot, your brain anticipates how your foot will land, right? So it becomes automated. It's not like you're a baby learning to walk, and we lose appreciation for all the things that our brain is doing to automate this. But if your brain gets this wrong, you might trip. So if you've ever been on one of those walking escalators in the airport and you get to the end and you stumble, that's basically because you made a prediction error, right? We're used to having that normal next step and all of a sudden something changed. So, to realize just again how much we predict and automate is pretty amazing. Now, your brain also makes predictions about other people in the world. Studies show that when you meet strangers, that you like and trust them more when their facial movements, like smiles or scowls, actually match your brain's guesses. So remarkably, you even consciously see their face more quickly. So we've all thought we saw something that we found actually wasn't there. We've made prediction errors, like this bear, for example. So this prediction comes from your past experience of fear for most of us, being a bear in the woods. So if an actual bear shows up in the next moment, you're already starting to run and you're experiencing fear. So this is why the emotion of fear feels so automatic in a situation like a reflex, because your brain explains the body situations and launches your movements before you're even consciously aware that that lump over there really wasn't a bear. It just looked like one. Thank God. So that's past experiences. So now we're going to talk about, now that we understand these three ingredients and what really kind of creates our emotions and understanding that we create these emotions, now we know that that might give us a key to work with them. So let's talk about each of these areas and what we might be able to do to influence them for the better. So the first one, again, is changing your body budget, right? So we want to change it as the most straightforward thing of the three, but again, not easy always. So in wellness, we always like to say eat healthy, get enough sleep, exercise regularly, and your brain won't have to work as hard to keep your body budget in balance. That means that your mood would be less negative and your brain will have fewer opportunities to create unpleasant emotions. Again, it's that general self-care that can boost our moods and make us feel better, not just physically, but also emotionally. So we can also change the second ingredient. Our current situation, we have a variety of things we can do to influence that. You can directly adjust your surroundings, maybe to move to another location if your environment you know is really feeling negative to you. So maybe leave the room or take a walk. And if that's not possible, you can actually indirectly change your surroundings by paying attention to other things around you. That's being mindful, right? So maybe focusing on your breath or focusing on the feeling of your feet on the floor. Doing something to ground yourself in present attention and senses can help to shift your focus. So let's talk about now the third ingredient, and that's your predictions from past experience. This one's the toughest to alter because we don't live in the past, right? So it's impossible to change that. Yet, if you take action in the present, you can modify your brain's predictions in the future and change your future emotions, right? So in the following slides, we're going to provide some skills that you can work with to modify your prediction and help manage your emotions and your body budget. Here we go. So 5 skills for emotional mastery. And these are ones that you can try and find, what works for you. So I'm just going to kind of throw them out there and you can decide really what's going to benefit you the most. So the first one is to really make the choice to be present. There's something called interoception, which means looking inside. And this is something that activates, I'm going to get a little brainy on you, but the medial prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that notices what's going on inside of us. And it also allows us to feel what we're feeling. It makes us aware. So we can change the way we feel by becoming aware of our inner experience and learning again what's really going on. That would be the most skillful thing to do at first when you start to feel something come up, is just hit the pause button and just bring yourself into this present curious state of awareness. The flip side of that would be the common unfortunate tactic that we use of avoidance. When we feel something unpleasant or difficult, a lot of times our instinct might be to turn away from it because we don't want to face it. Have you ever tried to distract yourself or escape? Maybe going on the internet or Facebook, having some alcohol, eating, anything else that's pleasurable to just take your mind off of things. But unfortunately, if we keep avoiding things, they tend to resurface over and over again. So it becomes a self-defeating pattern. And we also don't usually feel good about the habits that we chose in order to avoid the situation. So I think it's better to work with these emotions and accept them. And then hopefully by doing that, we can grow some confidence and some strength in dealing with them. So let's talk about some strategies beyond just the present to check in and then really identify what we're feeling. So I think it's helpful to kind of ask yourself in that moment, what is it that I'm really feeling right now? So again, it might be, most of us say good or bad, right? But I think it's helpful to go a little bit deeper so we really have a better understanding of what's happening. So asking yourself also, could it be something else that I'm feeling when you identify, geez, I'm feeling angry? Well, could we use a little bit more emotional granularity? And what that means is really using a more of a precise description of what that anger feels like. So you can see on my feelings wheel here that we have a lot of other categories, even ones beyond what you see, to get a little bit more precise about what's happening. So maybe we're feeling really insecure. Maybe it's almost an embarrassment or a shame kind of a feeling of anger. So again, kind of getting a sense of, a little bit of a deeper dive of what is actually happening in the scenario and how does it feel in my physical body. Again, do I feel like my face is hot? Am I noticing that there's a really gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach? Or do I hold a lot of tension right now in my fists? What does this feel like for me? And then the last thing I would say is, as you're trying to figure this out, try to be as kind to yourself as possible as opposed to holding judgment about this. And it's also helpful to speak to yourself in a third person voice and actually trying to use the voice that you would use if you were speaking to a child. So speaking to yourself kindly and supportively, because what that actually does is it enables your consciousness to perceive the situation as if it's happening to someone else. And then, again, the intensity of your emotions when you start to recognize this sometimes will minify when we become somewhat separated from the situation. So kind of helps to give us a little bit of space. So the third tip that I'm going to throw out is to really acknowledge and appreciate your emotions. So as I was mentioning before, we want to have that granularity of describing what is it that I'm really feeling, and then also getting curious about what is that telling you? What could you decide or take away from this? What can you learn from this? And again, not labeling this as good or bad or right or wrong, just to really accept and allow it to explain something that is really important that maybe we need to make some changes or address. So again, this is an honest communication with yourself as well as with others. And it's something that we can't always solve in the moment, but it interrupts patterns, those habitual reactions that we want to change so that we can prevent the same problem from happening in the future. And I also put this little graphic up here, the mood meter, and it says, how are you feeling, with a scale axis of energy level rating and then feelings. So most of the time we can break ourselves down. If you have a hard time with words or granularity, you can also look at this little graph and get a sense of, okay, so maybe right now I'm feeling like my energy is pretty low and I'm also feeling pretty unpleasant. That's kind of putting me into almost a sad or a depressive kind of a feeling. And again, when I'm trying to, move my way through my workday or make important decisions and I'm really low on energy and I'm not feeling well, maybe this isn't really the best time to be trying to make some major decisions of, coping with change or something like that. Now, on the flip side, if we were really feeling like we had a lot of energy, but we're also still feeling unpleasant, that might dictate to us that we have an awful lot of anxiety going on. And in that moment, we really need to do something to have an outlet to take care of this energy. So maybe we need to take a walk to kind of burn that off a little bit. Or we need to do something else that's calming. And we're going to talk about that on one of the future slides of how to calm down that fight or flight response and get our nervous system to kind of regulate a little bit. So this is where we come into breathing and riding the wave. So most of us, like a wave, experience emotions in fleeting ways. They don't last forever, right? Whether they're positive or negative, they're usually temporary. And most emotions, they say, last approximately 60 to 90 seconds. That's not very long. So if you ever heard, your parents say, if you're getting angry, just count to 10 before you say anything, it's not actually bad advice. So what I will throw in there as well is that body awareness is really, really important because it helps us train our arousal system. So it's important to really recognize that, a lot of times our fight or flight system gets triggered, okay, whether it's from a situation or because possibly we're just always in a state of tension. If you have ever heard of the concept of myofascial release, which is where people are foam rolling, for example, be aware that the fascia in the body, which is the tissue that encapsulates all the muscles, carries lots and lots of nerve endings. There's pain nerve endings, there's ones for proprioception, and there's ones that are for interoception. So all of the ways that your body is putting out feelers to its senses of what is happening. Am I tense? Am I relaxed? It sends all those signals up a big nerve pathway called the vagus nerve to your brain. So we can think about really training ourselves to relax from the top down by being aware, or from the bottom up by actually relaxing the body, right? So again, I think mind-body practices really can provide better options than habitual reactions to tough situations or stress by sending relaxation signals to our brain through that vagus nerve. So an example, a very, very simple one, is just taking some slow, calming, deep breaths, sending signals to our brain that we're moving into a relaxed state so that we can quiet down that fight or flight system. So I'm going to give you a little technique that we can try right now, and the acronym is breathwa. And this stands for breathe, feel, relax, watch, and allow. So with that, you want to give this a little try. I'm going to have you just get comfortable in your chairs, placing your feet flat on the floor in like a kind of a meditative posture so we can have some interoception here and just really be aware of what's going on internally. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And what we're going to do is we're going to conjure up some kind of a difficult situation or emotion that you've dealt with recently. So I hate to bring any strain into your day by having you think about something unpleasant, but hopefully we'll be able to work through it with this exercise. So again, think about something that's just been difficult for you and visualize that. Notice what feelings come with that. Again, whether they're physical sensations of the body. Again, it's reminding you of a past situation. What is it bringing up for you? So at this point, if it's really coming to the surface, you're probably noticing some sensations. There's thoughts going through your mind. So if this happens to you in your day-to-day life, what I'm going to invite you to do with this breathwa exercise is hit the brakes and pause. Again, that's being aware. And let's interrupt things with some slow, calming breaths to calm down the state of anxiousness in the body. So let's take 3 slow, deep breaths, inhaling through your nose, bringing that breath nice and deep into the belly, and then slowly releasing that breath with a long exhale. And again, nice, slow, deep breath. Again, softening the belly, expanding ribs. And slowly releasing the breath out. Take one more deep breath on your own. And with this last exhalation, I want you to relax the body now. So notice what's happening in your body. Continue to breathe nice and easy on your own. And just notice if there's any spots of tension or tightness. Maybe releasing your jaw a little bit, relaxing the eyes and the forehead. Think about relaxing through the neck and the shoulders, even if you need to do a few little gentle shoulder circles. Unclench the muscles in your butt and your legs and your abdomen. Just let everything soften. And again, allow that breath to flow. Now, in this more relaxed state, you probably feel a difference between when you first conjured up that frustrating emotional thought. And now in this relaxed state, we've been able to feel what's happening inside of us and relax through it. And at this point, we just want to be our own witness. We just want to watch. We just want to notice without judgment, really what this is feeling like for us right now. What is the body telling you? Just what can you notice? What can you learn? And then the last part of this, the allow, is to not judge. It's to really honor everything that's present right now and to just see what you can learn from it. And to know that as we've allowed this, just like the waves in the ocean settling back out into the sea, we've been able to completely ride that wave into calm, right? And we've shown up differently. We didn't react to the situation. Instead, we worked our way through it. So that's breathwa, and I appreciate you guys practicing that. You can open your eyes and come back if you did have them closed for that exercise. So again, remember BFRWA, interrupting that stress response and calming the body. So the last skill that I'm going to share with you is expressive writing. It's a very simple exercise, just simply writing down your thoughts, and you don't have to filter them. It can be positive thoughts, it can be negative thoughts. It's whatever is coming to your mind at the moment. But what this does is it actually creates connection with your senses, especially the senses of vision and touch. And they find that associating thoughts with physical sensations actually forms new neurological connections. And it also helps you to distance yourself from the thoughts by putting them down on paper. So these new neurological connections, we really want to just, again, change habitual responses, have a better outlet and a different way of thinking about things and engaging our nervous system so that we don't keep ourselves stuck in that same pattern, right? That same habitual reaction time after time. So I think the last part of this that's really, really important is once you write down all of these thoughts, again, with no rules, just freely write, the one thing that you must do is you must rip it up when you're done or throw it in a fire, whatever it is. That's a way of not becoming attached to what you've written, knowing that we can change at any moment and they were just the thoughts for that moment. We're not married to them and we're actually going to destroy them and move on. All right, so expressive writing, get yourself a journal, nothing fancy. And again, it can be 4 minutes, it can be 10 minutes. It's whatever you have time for, just put pen to paper. So now that we've talked about 5 skills that you can try, anywhere from things that regulate your body budget to, changing your thought process or doing a little bit more introspection or self-analysis, I think the bottom line in all of this is we want to really be proactive rather than reactive. So that means that we're going to take action. The next time that you're noticing, again, you become aware that you're in a situation that's bringing up some difficult, unpleasant emotions, take some action right away. This helps you, again, break that pattern of your habitual reaction, and it strengthens a new habit, a new way of responding, or a new attitude. That's what we call neuroplasticity, right? Like practice. The more that we practice something, the more that we adapt and change to a new behavior. Our brain learns a new pattern. So again, as we do this, as we make these changes, each one that we make is a win. It helps us to build confidence and perspective, knowing that we handled this situation differently. We have power over our emotional responses, right? Because we create them. And I will lastly add that if all this introspection really sounds like it's unnecessary or it's more than you can handle, maybe you need more support, just know that there's some great therapists or life coaches out there that really can help you also reframe these situations. So this isn't always a DIY, but these tips certainly can't hurt. So, give them a try and again, see what works for you. So that's the end of my presentation. If you do have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me. You can reach me in the wellness department. Again, my name is Lisa Laramy and my email is in the BMC directory, or I am at LLARAMY@bhs1.org. And I do want to share that a lot of the content today came from this amazing book that I recommend if you do want to read more about emotions. It's called How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. I had the pleasure of seeing her a couple of years ago at a Harvard conference, and she is a fantastic researcher who has really changed the way that we view emotions and how the brain works. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. Thank you so much for being with me today to explore emotions, and I hope that you have a pleasant rest of your day, but if not, pick skills 1 through 5.